Here we go, everybody. Let's get into the MMA session. We're going to take a look at UFC on ESPN 3, Ngannou versus Dos Santos. For the first fight on the main card, we have Alonzo Menifield, who's 8-0, versus Paul Craig, UFC vet at 11-3. Alonzo Menifield. He's one of the latest in the surge of former athletic football players transitioning to MMA. He has impressive power, which you can tell by looking at how long his fights have lasted. In my opinion, he hasn't been challenged in all aspects of his MMA game. What challenges does Paul Craig present?
What Paul Craig brings to this fight is UFC experience. He's been in the UFC for many years, fought a lot of top-level contenders. Paul Craig isn't afraid to exchange on the feet. He has a diverse arsenal of kicks. He's mostly looking to use his jab to bait his opponent into getting more aggressive. He'll tap him on the from the outside, or he'll apply pressure with the jabs or inside low kicks. Once the opponent starts getting overly aggressive, he'll look to change levels, and if they're being too timid against the cage, he'll look to take them down. Paul Craig has been knocked out. That is important to recognize with him going into this fight against an athletic, powerful person. But Paul Craig is very good on the ground. He's looking to throw up submissions if he's taken down, or he's looking to take you down, be on top, and still go for takedowns. He'll pepper you and soften you up with shots, but he's always primarily looking for the submission. If Paul Craig is to be successful in this fight, he needs to take his opponent down, look to dominate him for either all 3 rounds or to get a submission with someone who doesn't have a long, extensive grappling pedigree. So with that being said, I'm actually going to go with the veteran in this fight. I'm not going to go with the athleticism. I'm going to go with someone who I believe is better at grappling. Paul Craig is going to be the better overall MMA fighter. I see Paul Craig using his striking experience to control the octagon and bait Alonzo into the clinch. He's either going to pepper him with jabs from the outside and get Alonzo to commit and clinch up with him, and or get Alonzo to commit with strikes and level change on him. If Alonzo does neither and plays it smart, don't be surprised if Paul Craig starts throwing inside low kicks, crazy random spinning heel kicks and such, in order to get Alonzo to start getting more aggressive. So with that being said, I see Paul Craig getting the clinch at some point, taking him down, getting in the grappling exchange, and winning via submission. So I got Paul Craig winning via submission in the first round. But he needs to be careful because he does have a vulnerability to athletic, powerful strikers. With that being said, how do you see this fight going, and for what reason?
I think Alonzo's athleticism and speed is going to be too much for Paul Craig at this stage of his career. I think it's obvious Paul Craig wants to take this fight to the ground, and Alonzo will be first to the punch. He has a quick 1-2 that'll catch anybody at this level. Every time Paul Craig attempts to establish his jab, he'll be in danger. I see him getting stunned in the exchanges, and Alonzo Menifield will be able to finish him with his ground and pound, earning a first round knockout. What's the next fight we're covering?
Our next fight of the night is Roosevelt Roberts, who's currently 8-0, against Vinc Pichel, who's coming into this fight at 11-2. So let's start with Vinc Pichel. Vinc Pichel is coming into this fight notoriously known as a knockout puncher. He's powerful, somewhat unorthodox. He throws looping hooks, very powerful straight hooks. With Vinc usually having the punching power over his opponents, he's usually looking to stand up in the fight, but he's not afraid to take you down and try to ground and pound you out. And when he takes his opponents down, it's not with finesse or some beautiful long wrestling degree, chain wrestling, or some super nice high crotch. No. When Vinc Pichel from hell is looking to take you down, he's getting his hands locked right under your butt, picking you up, taking you for a ride, and throwing you on the mat. In this fight against Roosevelt Roberts, Vinc is going to have to utilize his strength against someone who has range on him. How do you see this fight going, and what strengths does Roosevelt Roberts bring to this fight?
Roosevelt Roberts brings a high striking output. He has a long 1-2, which he throws in a peppering fashion. By that I mean he doesn't put all his power into every shot. The high pace causes his opponents to back up against the fence, where Robert can show off his grappling skills. His long frame allows him to go for submissions where the opponent isn't necessarily expecting it, like we saw in the Daryl Horcher fight with the standing guillotine. I think Roosevelt would bring too many looks on the ground and on the feet versus Vinc Pichel. I'm going to go with Roosevelt with the decision win. How do you see this going?
I'm going to have to disagree with you on this matchup. I'm going to have to go with Vinc Pichel in this fight. I see Vinc Pichel being too physically imposing. He's going to be too physically overwhelming for Roosevelt Roberts. I see him pushing him up against the cage, occasionally throwing him down on the mat, making Roosevelt Robert really have to work to get up and losing some of his gas tank. Vinc Pichel is going to be the aggressor. He's going to be the physically overwhelming individual. I think he can keep it up and win a decision victory for the entire fight. The biggest threat coming from Roosevelt for Vinc is going to be Roosevelt Roosevelt's counters while moving backwards, so Vinc is going to have to be cautious while moving in and applying pressure to Roosevelt. With that being said, let us move on to the next fight.
Next up, we have Demain Maia with a record of 26-9 versus Anthony Rocco Martin, who's 16-4. Demain Maia is a specialist on the ground. He's been able to find success consistently in his long UFC tenure. Over that span, he's been able to round out the rough edges in his game to become more competitive, but he still relies mainly on his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. How do you see that being a problem for Anthony Martin?
Well, Anthony comes to this fight with the 50% takedown defense. Another problem for him is going to be his stance. He loves to stay in the boxing lead leg forward sort of stance. Though he does throw inside leg kicks and some kind of body kicks, for the most part, Rocco is looking to have boxing exchanges. He's looking to bait you into swinging in on him so he can lean back or move backwards at an angle and counter you. He loves to throw check hooks while moving backwards, but in my opinion, he likes to stand a bit too tall, and for the fact that he leaves his hands down, he occasionally forgets to bring them back up. Anthony is usually looking to win fights via decision. In his last 3 fights, he has 1 decision, 1 KO, 1 submission, but for the most part, the rest of his fights were all decisions. He has a 12-minute fight time average. All these things are actually going to play against him, against someone like Demain Maia. The longer you're in there with Demain Maia, the more of a chance he has to get on your back and choke you out. So for that, I'm going to say Demain Maia is going to have enough time to take Rocco out. He doesn't have the punching power to keep Demain Maia off him. He doesn't have the jiu-jitsu technicality to beat Demain Maia in the jiu-jitsu grappling exchange, and he relies too heavily on his scrambles. He's not so far advanced in the striking exchanges to really beat up Demain Maia, nor does he apply enough pressure. So for that, I got Demain Maia winning via rear naked choke in the second round. So with all that being said, how do you see this fight going and for what reason?
I agree with you. I think Demain Maia is going to be able to take advantage of Anthony Rocco's stance with his lead leg being heavy and out there for the single leg. Demain Maia does a good job of cutting the angle and running the pipe. I think Anthony's going to be able to fend off Maia for a couple rounds. However, I see Maia finishing it with the rear naked as well in the third round. And next up, we got the co-main event.
And here we have Joseph Benevidez, who's 27-5, versus Jussier Formiga, who's 23-5. What can I say about Joseph Benevidez that most people don't already know? He's a very dynamic, diverse individual, a complete MMA fighter. If you want to grapple with him, he's great at causing scrambles, getting back to his feet, and exchanging in strikes again. He's great at incorporating his kicks into any of his punching combinations. He'll throw the same combination over and over and then incorporate a kick out of nowhere just to mix it up. Joseph Benevidez can fight out of both stances. He'll shoot one combination from one stance, switch stances into another, and throw the same combination. This way, he's really giving you the same look, but from 2 different positions in succession, which actually messes up a lot of fighters. One common trait that Joseph Benevidez likes to do in his striking game is to actually blitz in or step in with a jab-cross combination, follow up with some sort of head kick, or he'll do a jab-cross combination and do a duck under or a roll, slip out to the left and exit. In what way do you see Formiga being able to implement his own skills on someone as diverse and dynamic as Joseph Benevidez?
Jussier Formiga has a very high fight IQ. He knows his strengths and his weaknesses. There's no question that he's looking to take it to the ground. Even though his opponent knows his game plan, he still does a good job of getting his opponent to think that they're gonna strike on the feet the entire fight. His go-to counter is throwing multiple hooks, cutting the distance, and grabbing his opponent for the clinch, where he has a variety of hip tosses and trips. From there, we see where he truly shines on the ground. With that being said, I'm going to go with Joseph Benevidez. I think he presents too many challenges in different aspects of the fight. He's a more refined striker, and he also possesses the ability to get up if Formiga does take him down. Formiga tends to keep his head center line, and I believe eventually Joe will find his head kick and finish the fight third round. Will Benevidez remain the number 1 contender after this fight?
I believe so. Joseph is really good at staying on the outside and then deciding when he wants to blitz in. He's good at baiting his opponents, tricking them, luring them in, and staying light on his feet. He has a lot of different exit strategies. The only real way you can counter Joseph Benevidez is to have a real quick jab cross and very good boxing fundamentals. Other than that, his risky movements usually are only a benefit to him because most of his opponents cannot count on it due to lack of very good fundamentals. So with that being said, I believe Joseph Benevidez has all the skills to keep this fight on the feet, not fall for any of Formiga's traps, none of his clinches, immediately cause scrambles if he does get taken to the mat, and be too slick and diverse on the feet for Formiga to ever feel comfortable enough to take control of the fight or octagon. And to close out the night, we have the main fight of the card.
We have a heavyweight bout between Francis Ngannou, with a record of 13-3, versus Junior Dos Santos, who's 21-5. Francis is known for his devastating knockouts. He has a great recognition of distance, along with his big frame makes him the ideal counterpuncher. Everyone has power in the heavyweight division, however, Francis's power is on another level. That's why I think he's gonna knock out Junior Dos Santos in the first round. It's way too dangerous to get in a striking match with Francis Ngannou. What's your prediction on this fight, and what does Junior do to avoid Francis's power?
He sticks to boxing fundamentals. He uses his great footwork and head movement and awareness of what angles Francis is trying to cut on him so that he can always be one step ahead of Francis. He can't try to get into a firefight with Francis at any point, even if he's easier to hit than he first anticipates Francis is going to be. So the key is patience from Junior Dos Santos, but also in and out movement with quick escapes and keeping his hands up. I know sometimes he likes to keep his lead hand down, but he's going to need to keep that hand up. Or when he does come in with that movement, occasionally he should blitz into Ngannou, clinch up with him, and push him into the fence. He should try to wear on Francis, get him kind of tired, get him breathing, and get him pre-anticipating what Junior might actually do. So I'm saying Junior should incorporate all of his MMA skills. He should try to wrestle him, but not to the extent where he tires himself out either. Just enough to get Francis on his toes, and only up against the fence so that he's more quote-unquote safe, even though there's nowhere to be safe from Francis Ngannou. I'm actually still going to pick Francis Ngannou. I think he's just plainly too powerful, and in a 5-round fight, I think he's going to be able to find an opportunity. He shows that he has patience now, he won't gas himself out, and Junior Dos Santos does leave himself still open to get hit. And he does get a little too confident when he starts to land a lot on his opponent. So I'm going to pick a 3rd-round knockout by Francis Ngannou. So those are our predictions. We ain't dissing, nor are we dismissing. We just hitters, and we just ain't ever gonna quit hitting.
Enjoy the fights, everyone, and thanks for joining the MMA session.